Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. And welcome to part 3 of my 80s movie marathon. Now, who could ever forget the famous detective in English literature, Sherlock Holmes? For those who don't know who Sherlock Holmes is, and I doubt there's a single person out there who doesn't, here's a quick history lesson. Sherlock Holmes is a fictional private detective created by British author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Referring to himself as a consulting detective in the stories, Holmes is known for his proficiency with observation, science, and logical reasoning that borders on the fantastic, which he employs while investigating cases for a wide variety of clients, including Scotland Yard. Though not the first fictional detective, Sherlock Holmes is arguably the best known, with Guinness World Records listing him as the most portrayed movie character in history. Holmes' popularity and fame are such that many have believed him to be not a fictional character, but a real individual. Numerous literary and fan societies have been founded that pretend to operate on this principle. So, other than the 2 recent Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, I know a few movies that feature Sherlock Holmes. For example, The Hounds of the Baskervilles was featured in The Pagemaster, and also Chip was a Sherlock Holmes fanatic in one episode of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And a few months ago, Romeo and Juliet had a sequel featuring a gnome version of the famous detective. However, today, we're going to look into a mouse version of Sherlock Holmes from the mid-80s, and it's one of my favorite Disney films from my childhood. Released on July 2nd, 1986, the movie is The Great Mouse Detective. Now let's get this case cracking. In Victorian-era London, England, circa 1897, a little girl mouse's toymaker father is abducted by a peg-legged bat. She enlists the aid of the famous detective Basil of Baker Street and Dr. Dawson. The case expands as Basil ends up pitting his wits against his old adversary, Professor Ratigan, who wants to become supreme ruler of all mousedom. So, what do I think of this movie? Well, wowie zowie, what an amazing film it is. And this is another animated movie that should be considered as an underrated classic. And while this movie did have a moderate success at the box office, it was outgrossed by another mouse movie that was released around the exact same year, Don Bluth's An American Tail. But to further explain why I enjoy the movie, let's move on to Mustang notes. The movie was directed by Bernie Mattinson, David Michener, and the team of John Musker and Ron Clements in their directorial debut. Also, this movie is based on the children's book series Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus. It draws heavily on the tradition of Sherlock Holmes, with a heroic mouse who consciously emulates the detective. Titus named the main character after British actor Basil Rathbone, who is best remembered for playing Sherlock Holmes in movies. And of course, his voice, which was sampled from the 1966 reading of the Red-Headed League, was the voice of Sherlock Holmes in the movie, 19 years after his death. The idea of doing an animated movie about Sherlock Holmes with animals was first discussed about during the production of The Rescuers. In 1982, Ron Clements proposed adapting the children's book series into an animated feature, and along with story artist Pete Young, it was pitched to Disney president and CEO Ron Miller, who approved the project. Earlier in his career, Clements created a 15-minute Sherlock Holmes animated short recorded on Super 8 film. Because the animators were displeased with the direction of the Black Cauldron, Basil of Baker Street was approved as an alternative project. Now, as for the animation, I really like how the animation looks in this movie. Plus, the scene inside Big Ben looks incredible. Believe it or not, this movie was the first time Disney used computer-generated backgrounds, and this was before Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Also, after watching this movie again, it brings back wonderful memories from when I visited London back in summer 2010. Another thing that makes this movie great is the score, provided by the late Henry Mancini, who has done musical scores for Breakfast at Tiffany's, Santa Claus the Movie, Tom and Jerry the Movie, and the famous Pink Panther theme. Also to note, this movie has a few Disney references in it. For example, in the toy store, there is a music box made up of 4 firemen, which is a reference to the Dixieland band, the Firehouse 5 plus 2. There's also a music box with Dumbo blowing bubbles from his trunk. One of Ratigan's henchmen is Bill, the lizard with a ladder in Disney's Alice in Wonderland, and in one scene, Toby is running past a horse-drawn carriage, which was reused from Lady and the Tramp. And now, here's where we come to the songs. And in total, there are 3 songs featured in this movie. Let's start with the villain song, The World's Greatest Criminal Mind, sung by Ratigan and his henchmen. And, man, I love this song, ever since I first saw it on the Be Our Guest sing-along video. What makes this song great are the lyrics, which are really nasty, especially the part where Bartholomew gets eaten by Felicia. The next song, which is performed at a rundown British pub, is Let Me Be Good to You, sung by Miss Kitty Mouse, voiced by Melissa Manchester, whom, after this movie, sung the opening song in Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. In my opinion, while this song does start out slow and sweet, it is a little inappropriate when Kitty's dancers come on stage with her, especially with the way the choreography is, and when a drunken Dawson joins them on stage, which ends up causing a large bar fight afterwards. The last song in the movie is Goodbye So Soon, which is sung by Ratigan on a record player, while Basil and Dawson are tied to a death trap, made up of a mouse trap, a gun, a bow and arrow, a hatchet, and an anvil, which is followed by a camera taking a picture to see if Basil died or not. In my eyes, this song is nice to listen to, and that's basically all I can say. So, let's move on to the voice actors. Our hero, Basil of Baker Street, is voiced by the late Barry Ingham. Basil is a detective based on Sherlock Holmes. His main goal in the movie is to arrest Professor Ratigan and rescue Olivia Flaversham's father, while simultaneously preventing a royal assassination. There are a few differences between Basil in the book series and in the film version, such as mood swings in the latter. He also plays the violin quite well in the movie, whereas the book series states that Basil's violin playing was atrocious. So instead, in the book, Basil played the flute. In my opinion, Basil is a skilled detective, and he's very, very smart. And I really like his lab, which includes chemistry equipment, a microscope, and many other weird contraptions. Next we have Dr. David Q Dawson, voiced by Val Benton, best known as the Sultan from Aladdin the Animated Series. His character is based upon Dr. Watson. The interaction between him and Basil mimics that of Watson and Holmes, as Dawson is constantly amazed by Basil's quick-witted deductions. He eventually becomes Basil's associate, friend, and personal biographer, and he serves as the movie's narrator. To me, Dawson is a kind mouse when he takes Olivia to see Basil, kind of like a grandfather helping a kid in trouble. Also, I think Dawson has great medical history due to his business in Afghanistan prior to the movie. Next is Little Olivia, voiced by Suzanne Polaczek. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Olivia is an 8-year-old female mouse of Scottish descent who seeks Basil's help in finding her toymaker father. In my eyes, Olivia is really adorable, innocent, and brave, but a little mischievous. However, she does get irritated when people say her last name wrong. Kind of reminds me of me during my elementary through high school age when people thought my last name was Orro. I hated those times. Next up is Basil's loyal basset hound, Toby, whose vocals are provided by the great Frank Welker. Technically, Toby belongs to Sherlock Holmes, who lives above Basil. To me, Toby is a great dog companion, and he's very skilled with using his nose to find any of Basil's targets. But Toby can be distracted at times, even when it comes to snacks. Next we have Olivia's father, Hiram, voiced by the late Alan Young. Best known as Scrooge McDuck from DuckTales. Hiram works as a toy maker, and in the movie, he is kidnapped by Fidget and is forced by Ratigan to make a Queen Mousetoria robot for his evil scheme. Next we come to Basil's arch nemesis, the nefarious Professor Ratigan, a criminal mastermind rat voiced by the late, great Vincent Price, whom I've talked about in my blogs of Here Comes Peter Cottontail and The Thief and the Cobbler. And, oh boy, is this guy awesome. Ratigan is based on Professor Moriarty from the Sherlock Tales. In the movie, Ratigan plans to seize control of the British monarchy, as well as replacing the royal guards with his henchmen, getting rid of Queen Mousetoria, and replacing her with a robot that Hiram was forced to build. In the book series, his given name is Padriac, or however it's pronounced, and he's a mouse. However, in the movie, Ratigan refuses to be called a rat. At the end of the film, he falls off Big Ben following a savage battle with Basil, similar to the Sherlock Holmes story, The Final Problem. Also to note, Vincent Price has stated that his role as Ratigan was his absolute favorite. Next is Ratigan's bat henchman, Fidget, voiced by a helium-induced Candy Candido. who got to be in Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, The Phantom Toll Booth, and of course, Robin Hood. Fidget has a crippled wing and a peg leg, and as a result, he can't fly. In the movie, while Fidget can scare the crap out of children, he sucks at charades. Plus, he accidentally leaves behind a few clues for Basil to follow, like his muddy footprints, his hat, and a list of items. Nearing the end of the movie, Ratigan throws Fidget off of his airship and into a watery grave. Finally, we come to Felicia, Ratigan's large and pompous cat, who's also vocalized by Frank Welker. In the movie, Ratigan calls upon her by ringing a special bell to dispose of traitors or anyone who makes him angry. During the movie's climax, she is chased by Toby and gets torn to shreds by the Royal Guard dogs. And now, let's move on to my final words. Overall, The Great Mouse Detective is a fantastic Disney film from the 80s. It has a great drawing style, fantastic animation, a good story, and fantastic characters. Plus, the music by Henry Mancini is classic, and I'm proud that this movie gave Disney more confidence with the hit films that came afterwards. My rating? 100%. Well, that's it for today, everyone. Be sure to join me for one more Disney movie from the 80s. And, like the Christmas toy, this next movie is said to be the inspiration for Toy Story, but instead of toys, this one will feature appliances. Mustang Power.